He offered his maid's daughter 3 wishes as a casual game. But her first wish wasn't a house or $1 million. It was an indictment that would shatter his hollow world. He was a man who owned skylines, a man whose time was measured in millions, and he was profoundly empty. She was the 10-year-old girl in his kitchen, an observer who saw that his public smile never reached his cold, gray eyes. In a fit of arrogant power, the billionaire offered his maid's daughter 3 wishes. He expected requests for toys or trips. But this girl had just heard him refuse her mother a small advance for a painful tooth, moments after publicly donating $5 million. She wouldn't ask for a pony. She would ask for something absurd, an impossible wish that would trap the billionaire, forcing him to see what he had become and what he was about to endure. And before I forget, I'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. Leave a comment below. And with that, let's get to the story. He thought money could buy anything, until he met the girl who wanted nothing. James Anderson stood in his study, staring at his own reflection in the floor-to-ceiling glass. Outside, his vast estate was dark, the fountains silent. He was a man who owned skylines and futures, a man whose time was measured in millions, and he was utterly, profoundly empty. 3 floors below, in the cavernous steel kitchen, 10-year-old Emily Carter finished her math homework. She sat at the staff table, her blonde hair in a neat ponytail. She was waiting for her mother, Mary, who was the head housekeeper. Emily was a quiet child, but she was an observer. She saw things. She saw the way Mr. Anderson's assistants flinched when he entered a room. She saw how his public smile never, ever reached his cold, gray eyes. Tonight, that public voice was in use. Mr. Anderson was in the adjacent dining hall, his voice sharp and loud on a speakerphone. $5 million, yes, James said, pacing. To the children's hospital. Make sure the press release mentions the new oncology wing. It's vital they see the commitment. Schedule the photo op for Friday. Emily looked down at her workbook. She thought of a different phone call. Last week, her mother had been in this same kitchen, whispering, her face tight with worry. She had asked Mr. Anderson's personal assistant for a small advance. Just a few $100s. Emily needed a painful, complicated filling for a cavity, and the insurance didn't cover all of it. The request had been denied. Mr. Anderson does not handle staff payroll directly. The assistant had replied, her voice like ice. Now, Emily listened to the man who refused her mother a few $100s boast about giving away $5 million. It's about legacy, Tom, James continued. It's about making a difference. These children, they deserve a fighting chance. He ended the call and walked into the kitchen, stopping when he saw Emily. He rarely noticed her. She was usually just a silent shadow, vanishing when he appeared. You're still here, he said. It was not a question. Yes, sir. Waiting for my mom. James looked at her. Really looked at her. Small, serious, with watchful eyes. He had just closed a massive deal. He was in a mood of expansive, arrogant power. He felt an impulse, the same one that made him donate the $5 million. It felt good to be the king. You're Mary's girl. Emily. Emily Carter, sir. Well, Emily Carter, he said, pulling a bottle of sparkling water from the industrial refrigerator. I'm in an excellent mood. I just gave away a fortune to sick children. I feel generous. He leaned against the steel counter. So, I'm going to do something for you. I'm going to grant you 3 wishes. Anything you want. Go on. Ask. Emily just looked at him. What is it? He pressed, amused. A pony? A new computer? A trip to Disneyland? I own a resort near there. I could send you on my private jet. Name it. From the pantry, Mary emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face was pale with panic. Mr. Anderson, sir, please. Don't tease her. She's just a child. Emily, go to the staff room. Nonsense, Mary, James said, waving his hand. Let the girl dream. It's the least I can do. Go on, child. 3 wishes. Emily didn't think about toys or trips. She thought about the 2 voices. The loud, proud voice on the phone, and the cold, silent no for her mother. She thought about her tooth, which still ached. Why did you give that money, Mr. Anderson? Emily asked. James's smile faltered. It was not the question he expected. What? I told you. To help the sick children. But you didn't sound happy. Emily said, her voice small but clear. You sounded like you were buying something. Like when my mom orders the silver polish. The air in the room went still. Mary made a small, terrified sound. Emily, apologize. Right now? No, James said, his voice dropping. The amusement was gone. Let her speak. He felt a strange, cold prickle. No one, ever, spoke to him this way. Emily stood up, her worn sneakers quiet on the tile. My mom works for you every day. Her hands hurt at night. She needed help for my tooth. Your assistant said no. You give millions to children you don't know, but you wouldn't help the one in your own house. Silence. It was vast and heavy. It was the sound of a truth that had never been allowed in this mansion. Mary was trembling. Sir, I am so sorry. She doesn't know what she's saying, She knows exactly what she's saying, James said softly. His eyes were fixed on Emily. He felt a rage so pure and cold it almost made him laugh. He was being lectured on charity by his maid's daughter. You are either very brave, he said, or very, very foolish, child. My great-grandpa always said truth shouldn't be scary, Emily replied, her chin held high. He said it's just the truth. A flicker of curiosity cut through James's anger. And who was your great-grandfather? Sergeant Michael Carter, sir. He was a ranger. He landed at Point du Hoc on D-Day. James froze. He knew that name. Everyone in this city knew that name. Michael Carter was a legend. A statue of him stood downtown. He had single-handedly taken a German bunker, saving his platoon. James had donated money to have that statue polished last year. The irony was bitter. This girl, this small, blonde child, was descended from a man of actual, undeniable courage. It made her words feel heavier. It made him feel smaller. His arrogance had trapped him. He had made an offer. A man of his word, a man of legacy, could not back down. Not in front of the heir of Michael Carter. Very well, James said, his voice tight. You have your 3 wishes. Ask your first. But understand this. Once you speak it, I will honor it. James braced himself. He expected her to ask for the money for her tooth. He expected her to ask for $1 million or a house for her mother. The predictable, selfish grasp of human nature. My first wish, Emily said, her voice strong, is for you. James blinked. For me? Yes. I wish you would spend one whole day helping someone. For real. Not just writing a check. She took a breath and delivered the final, impossible condition. With no cameras, no assistants, and without anyone knowing who you are. Mary Carter put her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. James Anderson just stared. The request was absurd. It was an insult wrapped in a child's wish. One day? Helping. No name. He ran a global empire. He didn't help. He paid people to help. He delegated. He acquired. Do you have any idea what you are asking? He whispered, his fury returning. You dare throw my own generosity back in my face? No, sir, Emily said simply. I just want you to see what it feels like. To just help. I think you might like it. You don't look very happy, Mr. Anderson. Not ever. That struck him harder than the accusation. It was the one truth he never allowed himself to think. He wasn't happy. He was just rich. He wanted to yell. He wanted to fire Mary and throw them both out. But he couldn't. He was trapped. By his own boast, and by the steady, judging eyes of a 10-year-old girl. You are a strange child, Emily Carter, he said. He felt like a king who had just been checkmated by a pawn. Very well, he said, the words tasting like ash. You will have your wish. One day, he pointed a finger at her. But you will come with me. You will be the witness. You will make sure I fulfill this ridiculous bargain. Emily nodded, unfazed. Okay. When? Tomorrow, James snapped. 6 a.m. Be at the front door. Don't be late. He turned and stalked out of the kitchen. The sound of his expensive leather shoes on the marble floor was sharp and angry, echoing up the grand staircase. Mary sank into a kitchen chair. Emily, what have you done? I just made a wish, Mama, Emily said, turning back to her homework. He said I could. Later that night, James stood in his cavernous walk-in closet. It was the size of a small apartment. Suits in shades of black, gray, and blue hung in perfect, endless rows. He called his chief of staff, Susan. Susan, he said, his voice clipped. Clear my schedule for tomorrow. All of it. There was a shocked pause. Sir? But you have the quarterly board review at 3, and the call with the Tokyo Exchange at 8. It's clear. All, he repeated. Everything. I will be unreachable. Sir, may I ask why? Is it an emergency? It is a personal matter, he bit off. and have the black Range Rover brought to the front entrance at 5:50 a.m. No driver. I will be driving myself. This time, the silence was longer. Sir? Drive yourself. Are you incapable of following a simple instruction, Susan? No, sir. Of course not, sir. It will be done. He hung up. He stared at his suits. Without anyone knowing who you are. He couldn't wear a $10,000 suit. He walked to a part of the closet he hadn't touched in years. Buried in the back was a pair of dark jeans and a plain, black polo shirt. They had been purchased for a company picnic 5 years ago that he had, of course, skipped. He laid them out on his bed. They looked foreign. Pathetic. He was the most powerful man in the state, and he was being held hostage by a 10-year-old's wish. He felt absurd. And beneath the absurdity, he felt a small, cold flicker of something he hadn't felt in decades. Fear. Not of failure, but of the unknown. At 5:50 a.m., the great hall was dark and cold. Emily stood by the massive front doors, holding a small backpack. Her mother stood behind her, wringing her hands. Emily, please, Mary whispered, be polite. Do not say anything else. Just survive this day. I will, Mama. At 6 a.m. on the dot, James Anderson descended the grand staircase. He was wearing the jeans and the polo shirt. He looked profoundly uncomfortable. The clothes fit him, but they didn't belong to him. He looked like a king forced into a peasant's costume. You're punctual, he grunted. He didn't look at Mary. Let's go. Emily kissed her mother's cheek and followed him out. The air was cold and damp. The Range Rover sat gleaming in the driveway. James got into the driver's seat. He fumbled with the key fob, then jammed it into the console. The engine roared to life. Emily climbed into the passenger seat and buckled herself in. James pulled the vehicle onto the long, private road, past the silent security gates, and onto the public street. He felt wrong. He was driving. He never drove. So, he said, his voice tight, you are the director of this charade. Where are we going? It's not a charade, Emily said quietly. Remember? No cameras. He gripped the wheel, his knuckles white. Fine. Where? I know a place, Emily said. My mom and I, we volunteer there sometimes. When she has a day off. James scoffed. Volunteer? You have nothing. Why would you give away your time? You don't need things to help, Mr. Anderson, Emily said. You just need time. And your hands. James was silent. He just drove. Emily gave him directions. They left his world of high walls and manicured lawns. They crossed the bridge, over the gray, sluggish river. The buildings became smaller. The streets grew wider and cracked. Turn here, Emily said. He turned onto a narrow street lined with chain-link fences. He stopped in front of a low, brown brick building. The sign above the door was faded, the paint peeling. St. Jude's Community Soup Kitchen. James stared. He didn't move. A soup kitchen, he said, his voice flat. You brought me to a soup kitchen. You said you wanted to help people, Emily said, unbuckling her seatbelt. People are hungry in there. I could write them a check, James muttered, staring at the peeling paint. I could fund them for a decade. That's not helping, Emily said, opening her door. That's buying. Let's go. She hopped out and walked toward the entrance. James sat alone in his $200,000 car. He looked at the barred windows. He looked at the man sleeping on a bus bench across the street. He was the most powerful man in the state. And he was terrified. He got out of the car. He locked it. He pressed the button twice. Emily was waiting for him at the metal door. Breakfast service starts at 7, she said. They need help in the kitchen. They're always short on prep. James took a deep breath. The air smelled like old rain and exhaust. He followed the 10-year-old girl inside. The smell hit him first. Bleach, old coffee, and boiling potatoes. A woman with tired eyes and graying hair, wearing a stained apron, looked up. Emily, she said, her face breaking into a warm smile. What a surprise, honey. I didn't know you were coming. Hi, Brenda, Emily said. This is James. He's here to help. My great-grandpa's friend. James flinched at the lie, but Brenda just nodded, sizing him up. She saw a tall man in clean, new jeans, looking lost. James, huh? Brenda said, wiping her hand on her apron before holding it out. Well, James, we're glad to have you. We're short-handed. Frank's out sick. She gestured to a pile of burlap sacks in the corner. You look strong. Can you handle potatoes? James looked at her chapped hand. He slowly, reluctantly, took it. Her grip was like steel. Potatoes, he repeated. Yup. We need 'em peeled. All of 'em. For the hash. She pointed to a deep, metal sink. You know where the aprons are. Get James set up. Emily led him to a closet. He pulled a faded blue apron over his head and fumbled with the strings. Emily, without a word, reached up and tied it for him. It was the final humiliation. He was directed to the prep station. Before him sat 3 massive sacks of potatoes. Next to them was a small, cheap peeler. He picked up the peeler. He picked up a potato. He had never peeled a potato in his life. He scraped. A tiny, pathetic shaving came off. He pressed harder. The peeler skipped and sliced into his thumb. Damn it, he hissed, dropping the potato. A bright red bead of blood welled up. An older man in a wheelchair, wearing a veteran's cap, rolled up next to him. It's a peeler, son, not a broadsword. Watch your angles. He tossed James a bandage from a first aid kit. I'm Sal. I'll be dicing what you peel. Try to keep up. James wrapped the flimsy bandage around his thumb. His face burned. He, a man who navigated hostile takeovers, was being beaten by a root vegetable. He picked up the potato again. He went slower. Scrape. Turn. Scrape. It was maddening. After 5 minutes, he had one, badly mangled potato. Sal looked at it. At this rate, Sal said, we'll be serving breakfast tomorrow. I'm new at this, James growled. No kidding, Sal said. Hands are too soft. James ignored him. He focused. Scrape. Turn. Scrape. An hour passed. James's back ached. His thumb throbbed. He had a small pile of potatoes, but the sack seemed just as full. He was sweating. Emily, meanwhile, was a blur. She was pouring coffee, running trays, talking to the men and women at the tables, smiling. Hey, new guy. Brenda called out. Potato Mountain can wait. Service is starting. We need you on the line. Relief. What do I do? You're on slop, she said, pointing to a massive, steaming vat of potato and egg hash. You get 1 scoop. 1. Not 2. 1. We gotta make it stretch. Got it. James nodded, grabbing the large metal ladle. The line opened. The men and women he had seen waiting filed past, holding plastic trays. The first man shuffled up. He looked to be about James's age, but his face was a roadmap of hard living. He held out his plate. James plopped a scoop of hash onto it. The man stared at the scoop. That's it. That's my portion. 1 scoop, James said, his voice cold. That's the rule. Rule? The man snapped. Easy for you to say, pal. You ain't the one hungry. Next, James said, ignoring him. One by one they came. He scooped. He plopped. He avoided their eyes. He felt their shame, their anger. A young woman with a baby strapped to her chest came through. She looked exhausted. Could I maybe have a little extra? She whispered, glancing at the baby. He doesn't eat solid, but when I eat, he eats. James looked at her. He thought of the $5 million. An abstraction. He looked at the woman. Her need was real. He glanced at Brenda, who was busy. He dipped the ladle back in and gave the woman a second, smaller scoop. Thank you, she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. God bless you. She moved on. James felt a strange, tight feeling in his chest. It wasn't power. It was something else. Something warm and heavy. Suddenly, a commotion started near the door. A large, angry man was shouting at Brenda. What do you mean? You're out of coffee, the man yelled. I've been waiting an hour. I'm sorry, Bill, Brenda said, her voice calm but firm. The machine broke. The coffee's gone. That's not good enough, the man roared, and he slammed his fist on the counter. James tensed. His instinct was to call security, to have the man removed. But there was no security. The man, Bill, advanced on Brenda. I oughta. Hey, James heard himself shout. The man turned. He was big, much bigger than James. What did you say, new guy? James's heart was pounding. He put the ladle down. He walked slowly out from behind the counter. The room was quiet. Emily was watching from the corner. She said the coffee's gone, James said, his voice steady. He tried to sound reasonable, the way he did in a boardroom. Yelling won't fix the machine. Mind your own business, rich boy, Bill sneered, noticing James's clean shirt. What do you know about anything? I know, James said, that she's not the one you're angry at. Bill paused. What's that supposed to mean? You're not angry about the coffee, James said. You're angry that you're here. You're angry that it's cold. You're angry that life hasn't worked out. Bill's face darkened. You don't know me. I don't, James agreed. But I know anger. And yelling at her won't change a thing. It just makes you a bully. The room was dead silent. Bill stared at James. James stared back. He held the man's gaze, unblinking. Bill looked at James. He looked at Brenda. He looked at the room, full of people watching him. Finally, with a growl, he kicked a chair. Forget this. He stormed out, slamming the door. The room let out a collective breath. Brenda leaned against the counter. Wow, James. You handled that. Thank you. Sal rolled over. Not bad, rich boy, he said, with a hint of a smile. Not bad. James just nodded, his adrenaline fading. He went back to the line. He felt shaky, but as he picked up the ladle, he saw Emily. She was standing by the toast station, watching him. She wasn't smiling. She was just looking, seeing him. And for the first time, James Anderson didn't feel the need to look away. The breakfast service ended. The last few people trickled out, their footsteps echoing in the large hall. The room, which had been buzzing with strained, quiet energy, was now filled with the clatter of plastic trays and the scrape of chairs. James's arm was sore. His back ached. He had served hash to nearly 150 people. He had been cursed at, ignored, and, in one brief, startling moment, thanked with tears. All right, new guy, Brenda called out, pulling a fresh trash bag from a can. Line's done. Now the real work starts. James looked around. The floor was sticky. The tables were smeared with egg and grease. And in the prep corner, the mountain of potatoes sat, looking like a monument to his failure. You're not done, James, Sal said, rolling his wheelchair over. His voice was gruff, but the mocking tone was gone. Those spuds won't peel themselves for lunch. James nodded. He felt a strange resignation. He was no longer fighting the day. He was just in it. He took off the stained apron, dropped it in a bin, and got a fresh one. He returned to the low sink. He picked up the peeler. He picked up a potato. You're holding it wrong, Sal said, parking his chair beside him. He grabbed a peeler from a drawer and a potato from the sack. You're trying to scalp it. It's not an enemy. Look, like this. Sal's hands, though weathered, were quick and sure. He moved the peeler in long, smooth strokes, the skin falling away in a single, curling ribbon. See? Rhythm. Don't fight the shape. Follow it. James tried to copy the motion. Scrape. Turn. Scrape. It was still awkward. His peelings were thick, wasting the potato. You're still fighting it, Sal said, not unkindly. You got that I own the room stink on you. Or you did, till Bill showed up. You looked scared. I wasn't scared, James said too quickly. Bull, Sal said, not looking up from his work. Was terrified every single time I jumped out of a perfectly good airplane. But you do it anyway. That's the trick. Courage ain't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing the job. You did the job today, James. James looked at the veteran. Sal's legs were gone below the knee. His veteran cap was for a war James had only read about. This man was a hero, like Michael Carter. And he was here, in a soup kitchen, peeling potatoes. James's own sacrifices, missing a board meeting, driving himself, felt pathetic. Thank you, James said, the words feeling foreign. Don't thank me. Thank Emily. She's the one who brought you. James looked across the room. Emily was working with Brenda, wiping down the long folding tables. She was methodical, wiping in long, even strokes. She didn't complain. She didn't rush. She just did the work. He watched as one of the last men to leave, a man in a thin jacket, stopped to talk to her. Emily listened, her head tilted, and then reached into her own small backpack. She pulled out a pair of new, thick wool socks and handed them to the man. The man stared at the socks as if they were gold. He looked like he was about to cry. He took them, nodded once, and hurried out the door. James stared. He felt that tight, heavy feeling in his chest again. The girl had come here, to this place of desperate need, and had brought her own private charity. Well, socks. It was such a small thing. It was nothing. It was everything. He turned back to the potatoes, his throat thick. He attacked the pile with a new, quiet fury. Scrape. Turn. Scrape. He was no longer fighting the potato. He was fighting himself. He was fighting the man who had practiced his smile in a mirror. They worked for hours. The lunch service came and went. James was on the line again, this time serving a thin but hot stew. He was tired. He was sore. He was filthy. When the last plate was served, they cleaned the kitchen. James found himself on his hands and knees, scrubbing a patch of spilled soup from the floor. He didn't even think about it. He just did it. It was 3 p.m. when Brenda finally unhooked her own apron. "We're done for the day," she announced. "Thank you all." Brenda came over and, to James's profound shock, gave him a one-armed hug. "You're a lifesaver, James," she said. "You and Emily. You ever want a job, you come back. You're a natural." He didn't know what to say. He just nodded. They walked out the metal door into the cold afternoon light. The street looked the same. The man was still sleeping on the bench. But James felt different. He felt scoured, emptied out. They got into the Range Rover. The plush leather and the quiet, high-tech interior felt alien. It was too clean, too quiet. He started the engine and pulled away from the curb. He drove in silence for 10 minutes, heading back toward the bridge, back toward his world. He glanced over at Emily. She was looking out the window, her face calm. "Those socks," he said, his voice raspy. "You just gave them away." "He needed them," Emily said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. His feet were wet. "Where did you get them?" "I bought them. With my allowance. Mama and I, we know what they need most. Sometimes it's socks. Sometimes it's hand warmers." James gripped the steering wheel. Her allowance. His $5 million donation felt suddenly, horribly obscene. "Why socks?" "My great-grandpa always said, you take care of your feet, they take care of you. Soldiers know that. And cold people know it, too." James was silent for the rest of the drive. He realized his charity was about him. Hers was about them. When they pulled up the long driveway, it was dusk. The mansion was lit up, every window a perfect, golden square. It looked like a museum. Mary ran out the front door before the car even stopped. Her face was a mask of anxiety. "Emily, sir, are you is everything?" Emily hopped out and ran to her mother, hugging her tight. "It was fine, Mama. We made stew. And Mr. Anderson peeled potatoes." James got out of the car. He looked at Mary, his housekeeper. He had seen her almost every day for 6 years. He had never really seen her. He saw her now. She was a single mother, working her fingers to the bone, raising a daughter of impossible character. A daughter who had just saved him. "Mary," he said. She flinched, bracing for him to fire her. "Sir, your daughter," he said, "is an extraordinary person. You have raised her well." Mary's mouth fell open. "And," he continued, "about her tooth. Have your dentist send the bill directly to my office. All of it." Mary started to cry, her hand covering her mouth. "Sir, I can't. I'll pay you back." "It is not a loan, Mary," James said. "It is an overdue expense." He looked at Emily, who was watching this exchange with her usual, solemn stillness. "Well," James said, his voice heavy with fatigue, "the first wish is done. I did it." Emily nodded. "Yes, sir. You did. You were a good helper. So, I'm finished." "You finished the day," Emily corrected him. "But you're not finished." He sighed. He was too tired to be angry. "What does that mean?" "You learned how to do the work," she said. "But you still don't know why it matters. You still think the $5 million was more important than the socks." "Of course it was," James said, exasperated. "That $5 million will build an entire hospital wing. It will save hundreds of lives. The socks just made one man's feet warm for a day." "But you saw the man's face," Emily said. "You didn't see any of the children at the hospital." James stopped, the cold evening air hitting his face. "What? The hospital? The one you gave all that money to? The one with the new wing that will have your name on it?" "The children's hospital, yes. What about it? Have you ever been there?" Emily asked. James stared at her. Of course I have. For the gala. For the groundbreaking ceremony. I have the photos in my study." "No," Emily said, shaking her head. "That's for the cameras. Have you ever been inside? Have you ever walked down the halls? Have you ever seen the children you're saving?" He had not. He had people for that. He got reports. He got glossy brochures with smiling, cured children on the cover. He never went to the places themselves. They were depressing. He felt a cold, sinking dread. He knew what was coming. "My second wish, Mr. Anderson," Emily said, her small voice carrying the weight of a sentence. "Tomorrow, I wish you would go to that hospital. Not for a photo. Not to meet the director. I wish," she said, "you would just go, alone, and see what you bought." James looked at the massive, empty, gleaming house in front of him. He thought of the soup kitchen. He thought of Sal, and Brenda, and the woman with the baby. He had survived their world. But the thought of walking into a wing full of sick children, It terrified him more than anything he had ever faced. "Emily," he started, his voice pleading. "3 wishes, sir," she said. She took her mother's hand. "You promised." James stood alone on the driveway, the smell of potatoes and bleach still on his clothes. He had been stripped of his pride. Now, he was being asked to face his own legacy. And he had a terrible feeling that the gleaming, perfect wing with his name on it was as hollow as he was. The next morning was Monday. James Anderson awoke at 5 a.m., but he did not call his office. He knew, without looking, that his company was in freefall. His unexcused absence from the board review, his silence on the Tokyo call, it would be chaos. He felt a distant, cold spike of his old anxiety, but it was muffled, buried under the new, raw emotions of the weekend. He stood in his closet. He looked at the rows of suits. His armor. He looked at the jeans and polo shirt. His uniform. He put on the jeans. He went downstairs. He didn't go to the kitchen. He went to his study. On his desk, under a glass paperweight, was a stack of glossy photographs from the Children's Hospital Gala. There he was, smiling, holding a giant, ceremonial check. The hospital director was smiling. The governor was smiling. Everyone was clean, happy, and celebrating the money. He swept the photographs into a drawer and slammed it shut. He found Emily in the kitchen, packing her school lunch. Her mother, Mary, was ironing her own uniform, her movements quick and nervous. They both stopped when he entered. "Good morning, sir," Mary said, her voice trembling. She was terrified of this new, unpredictable man. "Mary," he said, his voice quiet. "Emily." Emily looked up at him, her gaze as steady as ever. "Are you ready, Mr. Anderson?" He nodded. "I am." He drove himself. He didn't take the Range Rover. He took a simple, dark gray sedan he kept for anonymous trips to his downtown office. It was still a $60,000 car, but it didn't scream billionaire. He parked in the public garage, not the reserved VIP donor lot. He paid for his parking ticket at the machine. He walked in through the main entrance, past the information desk, with all the other families. The smell hit him first. It was not the familiar smell of the gala, champagne and perfume. It was the real smell. Antiseptic, floor wax, cafeteria food, and a faint, sweet, chemical odor that spoke of sickness. His name was on the wall, a massive bronze plaque by the entrance to the new wing. The James P. Anderson Oncology Wing Funding for a Future, a Legacy of Hope. It looked like a tombstone. He pushed through the double doors. The wing was quiet. Too quiet. The walls were painted with bright murals, lions and giraffes, and colorful birds. A desperate, heartbreaking attempt at cheer. He saw the children. Small, frail bodies in oversized beds. For poles stood next to them like thin, silent soldiers. He heard the quiet, rhythmic beeping of machines. And he saw the parents. This, he had not expected. The parents were everywhere. They were asleep in uncomfortable-looking recliner chairs, their necks bent at painful angles. They were huddled in the hallway, whispering into cell phones, their faces etched with a kind of exhaustion James had never known. He recognized the look. It was the same hollow-eyed despair he'd seen in the soup kitchen line. It was the look of people with no options left. His $5 million wing was full of people who were out of hope. He walked down the hall. A doctor, young and tired, nodded at him. "Can I help you, sir? Are you lost?" "No," James said. "I'm just visiting." He felt like an intruder. He was a tourist in their suffering. He had paid for this suffering, he thought, with a wave of nausea. He had paid for this clean, well-lit place for people to watch their children fade. He looked into a room. A small boy, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, was sitting up in bed, staring out the window. He was bald, his skin a pale, translucent white. He was alone. James hesitated. He felt the urge to turn, to flee, to go back to his study and his spreadsheets. A woman walked up, holding 2 cups of coffee. She was the boy's mother. She looked at James, and her eyes, red-rimmed and weary, held no curiosity. Only a deep, flat exhaustion. "Are you visiting someone?" she asked. "I know," James said. "I'm not." "Are you lost?" "No. I helped build this place," he said, the words feeling like gravel in his mouth. "I'm a donor. I wanted to see it." The woman looked at him. There was no gratitude, just a hard, tired appraisal. "A donor. Well," she said, nodding toward the room. "This is it. This is where the money goes." James looked at the small boy. "What's his name?" "David." Why is he alone? His father's at work, she said, her voice flat. I was just getting coffee. We can't both be here all the time. The mortgage doesn't care if he's sick. The power company doesn't care. The old, familiar instinct surged in James. The fix. The need to solve the problem. With money. The mortgage, James said, reaching for his back pocket, where his wallet should be. He'd left it at home. I can help with that. I can call my office. I can take care of it. The woman's tired expression vanished. It was replaced by a low, fierce anger. You can what? She whispered, her voice shaking. Write a check? Pay my mortgage? Then what? Will you pay for the next one? Will you pay for the drugs the insurance decided not to cover this month? Will you pay for the gas to drive here every single day? She stepped closer, her anger a shield against her tears. Will you sit here for 12 hours, while he screams because the chemo feels like fire in his bones? James flinched. He had no answer. Your money, she said, her voice breaking, is just walls. It's a place for him to be sick. It's not help. Not real help. People like you. You buy your way out of feeling this. You put your name on a building so you don't have to come inside. She was wrong. The wing was help. The doctors, the nurses, the research, it was all vital. But James knew, in his heart, that she was also right. He had built the stage, but he had refused to watch the play. Inside the room, the boy, David, turned from the window. He looked at James with large, solemn eyes. My game's broken, David said, his voice a tiny, weak rasp. He pointed to a small, handheld video game on his rolling table. The charger port is loose. It won't charge. This was it. A problem. A real, solvable, human-sized problem. James's billionaire instinct roared. I'll buy you a new one. I'll buy you 100. I'll buy the whole company. He looked at the boy. He looked at the mother, who was watching him with bitter expectation, waiting for him to offer his sterile, useless money again. He thought of the soup kitchen. He thought of his conversation with Emily. You just need time. And your hands. Let me see it, James said. He walked into the room. It felt like crossing a border. He sat down in the hard, plastic visitor's chair. He picked up the small blue device. His hands, still sore from peeling potatoes, felt large and clumsy. My father. He was good at fixing things, James said, the memory coming to him from 1,000,000 years away. It was true. His father had been a watchmaker, a man of small, precise movements. A man James had left behind as too small, too slow. He jiggled the port. It was loose, the metal connector inside bent. He looked around. No tools. He was just James. He saw a box of tissues on the table. He took the small, cardboard tab from the opening of the box. He carefully folded it, once, twice, 3 times, making a tiny, firm shim. He used his thumbnail to push the bent connector pin back into place. Then, carefully, he wedged the folded cardboard into the small gap, bracing the loose port. It was a crude, simple fix. He plugged the charger cable back in. The small orange charging light on the device flickered, and then it held, bright and steady. David's eyes, which had been dull, suddenly widened. A small, weak smile touched his lips. You fixed it. It's just a temporary fix, James said, his voice thick. Thank you, David whispered. He picked up the game, his attention immediately captured by the bright, glowing screen. He was, for a moment, just a boy again, not a patient. James stood up. He looked at the mother. She was staring at him, her hand over her mouth. The anger was gone. The bitterness was gone. She was just looking at him. He hasn't smiled, she whispered, a tear rolling down her cheek. He hasn't smiled in 3 days. James Anderson, the man who moved markets, had fixed a broken toy with a piece of trash. And it was the single most important thing he had ever done. He nodded to her, his throat too tight to speak. He walked out of the room. He walked past the nurse's station. He walked down the hall, past the bright, lying murals. He walked out of the wing, past his own name carved in bronze. It meant nothing to him now. The boy's smile meant everything. He drove back to the mansion. He was not the same man who had left. He had been hollowed out. But this time, something new was filling the empty space. He found Emily in the kitchen. She was doing her homework, just as she had been 2 nights ago. It felt like a lifetime. Mary was there, too, peeling carrots for dinner. They both looked up. He was pale. His eyes were red. You saw, Emily said. It was not a question. I saw, he whispered. I met a boy. His name is David. He slumped into the small staff chair. He put his head in his hands. I gave them $5 million, he said, his voice raw and broken. And it meant nothing. I fixed his toy with a piece of cardboard, and that was. He couldn't finish. He finally understood. His money was a shield. It was a wall he built between himself and the world. It protected him from the reality of human need. It kept him separate. It kept him clean. And it kept him empty. I'm ready, he said, looking up at Emily. The arrogance was gone. The anger was gone. He was just a man. A tired, sad man. What is it? The third wish. I'll do it. Whatever it is. Emily looked at him. She saw the change. The coldness in his eyes was gone. The hardness in his mouth had softened. My first wish, she said, was to show you how to work. My second wish was to show you why you should. She stood up, her small face serious. My third wish is the hardest. I wish for you to spend one whole day without your money. At all. He blinked. What do you mean? Like at the soup kitchen? No, she said. That was just for a few hours. I mean a whole day? From morning until night. Tomorrow. You will leave this house. You will not take your wallet. You will not take your phone. You will not take your watch. She pointed to his shoes. You will not take those. Or that car. What? What am I supposed to do? James asked. You will leave here at 6 a.m., just like you did for the soup kitchen. But you will leave on foot. You will have nothing but the clothes you're wearing. This was the final test. She was not just taking away his pride or his anonymity. She was taking away his power. I just walk, he said, the concept alien. You have to survive, she said simply. You have to find food. You have to find your way. You can't call anyone. You can't buy anything. You can't command anyone. You have to ask, or work, or just be. James Anderson, billionaire, titan, philanthropist, felt a cold, primal fear. He had faced an angry man in a soup kitchen. He had faced a grieving mother in a hospital. Now he had to face the world with nothing. He had to become one of the men he had pitted. Okay, he said, his voice hoarse. Tomorrow. Emily nodded. We will see if you can survive, Mr. Anderson. He looked at his hands. The hands that had peeled potatoes. The hands that had fixed a toy. Tomorrow, they were all he would have. The next morning was Tuesday. It was the first day of his new life. And the last day of his old one. James Anderson awoke at 5 a.m. His body was sore. His back ached from the soup kitchen. His mind ached from the hospital. He felt scrubbed raw, inside and out. He did not go to his closet. He went to the mudroom by the kitchen entrance. There, in a corner, was a pair of old, cracked leatherwork boots. They belonged to his groundskeeper, a man whose name he suddenly realized he didn't know. He put them on. They were stiff, heavy, and a size too small. They felt real. He put on the same jeans and polo shirt. They were his uniform now. At 5:50 a.m., he stood in the grand hall. He had left his wallet on his dresser. He had left his phone. He had left his watch, a piece of machinery worth more than a car. He was just a man in a room. He heard a small noise. Emily was standing at the top of the stairs, in her pajamas. She was watching him. He didn't say anything. He just nodded once, acknowledging the contract. She nodded back. He walked to the massive front door. He opened it. The cold, damp air of the pre-dawn hit his face. He walked out. He walked down the long, winding driveway. The massive, ornamental iron gates sensed his approach and began to slide open. He walked through them. He heard the heavy, final click as the gates locked behind him. He was on the public road. Alone. He began to walk. He had no destination. He just walked, away from his home, away from his life. The sun began to rise. Cars, expensive ones, Porsches, Teslas, Bentleys, flew past him. The drivers, his neighbors, people he saw at galas, didn't even glance at him. He was invisible. He was just a man walking on the side of the road. An hour passed. Then two. The sun was up. He was in a suburb he didn't recognize. His feet, in the ill-fitting boots, were already starting to burn. He was thirsty. He saw a public park. A small, simple patch of grass with a swing set. He walked to a water fountain. He leaned over, cupped his hands, and drank. The water was cold and tasted like metal. It was the best thing he had ever tasted. He kept walking. The suburbs gave way to the city. He walked past towering glass buildings. He saw the headquarters of his own company, the Anderson Group, a monument of glass and steel. He stood across the street, looking at it. He was the king, and he was locked out of his own castle. He was just a bum on the street. He felt a sudden, sharp panic. I can't do this. He could walk in. He could tell the security guard who he was. He could be in his office in 5 minutes. He could have coffee. He could call his lawyers. He could fix this. He looked at his reflection in the glass, a small, shabby figure against the backdrop of his empire. He thought of Emily. He thought of David. He thought of Sal. He turned, and he kept walking. Noon. The hunger arrived. It was not the polite hunger of a delayed lunch meeting. It was a sharp, aching, gnawing knot. He was starving. He was in a part of town he didn't know. The buildings were smaller, the streets dirtier. He smelled food, hot grease, roasting meat. It was overwhelming. He passed a small, family-run diner. The Oak Tree Cafe. A sign, handwritten on cardboard, was taped in the window. Dishwasher needed. Inquire within. He stopped. He thought of the soup kitchen. He thought of the potatoes. He could do this. He pushed the door open. A small bell tinkled. A woman at the counter, her face lined with exhaustion, looked up at him with deep suspicion. Can I help you? His voice was a dry croak. I need food. I don't have any money. Her eyes narrowed. Then you're in the wrong place. We're not a shelter. But I saw your sign, he said, the words tumbling out. He was humbling himself. He was begging. The dishwasher. I can work. I'll wash dishes. For a meal. Please. The woman studied him. He didn't look like a bum. His clothes were clean, even if they were rumpled. But his eyes looked hungry. She sighed. You don't look the type. I'm a hard worker, James said. It was the truest thing he had said in 30 years. Please. Fine, she snapped. Sink's in the back. You give me 2 hours of hard work. Then you get a sandwich and a coffee. Deal, James said. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she grumbled. It's a hot, greasy hell back there. She was right. It was worse than the soup kitchen. The water was scalding. The pots were caked with old cheese and grease. The steam filled the tiny room. His back screamed in protest. His hands, already raw, were rubbed red. But he didn't stop. He scrubbed. He organized. He was James Anderson. He didn't just wash, he optimized. He created a system. He was the best dishwasher the Oak Tree Cafe had ever seen. 2 hours later, he had cleaned every pot, every pan, every plate in the place. The small kitchen was spotless. The woman came back, her arms crossed. She looked at the gleaming steel. Her jaw dropped. My word, she said. You're good. I had a lot to clean, he said. She went out front. She came back, not just with a sandwich, but with a full platter. A hot turkey sandwich, the bread grilled, with a pile of French fries and a cup of thick, black coffee. On the house, she said, her voice softer. All of it. James sat on a stool in the back, next to a bag of onions. He ate. The bread was soft. The turkey was salty. The fries were hot. It was, without question, the most delicious meal of his entire life. He ate slowly. He finished every crumb. When he was done, he washed his own plate. Thank you, he said to the woman. You ever need a job, for real? She said. You come back. He nodded. He walked out of the diner. The sun was starting to get low. He was tired. He was sore. And he had to walk home. It was miles. He walked, one foot in front of the other. The blisters on his feet had broken. He didn't care. He was just a body, moving. He was no longer a mind. He was no longer a name on a building. He was just James. It was pitch black when he finally reached the gates of his estate. It was past 10 o'clock. He was a shadow. He stood in front of the security camera. The red light glowed. A voice, sharp and suspicious, crackled from the speaker. This is private property. Sir, you need to leave, or I am calling the police. Now. James was too tired to be angry. He was too tired to be anything. He just looked into the camera. Frank, he said, his voice a rasp. It's me. It's James Anderson. Let me in. There was a long, shocked silence. Mr. Anderson? The gates slid open. He walked up the long, dark driveway. The mansion was lit up, a palace of light in the darkness. It looked absurd, a monument to one man's loneliness. He opened the massive, carved front door. The grand hall was dim, lit only by a single small lamp. She was there. Emily was sitting on the bottom step of the grand staircase, her backpack at her feet. She had been waiting for him. He stopped in front of her. He was filthy. He smelled of sweat, old coffee, and dishwater grease. His feet were bleeding. He was broken, and he was whole. He looked at her. the small, serious girl who had shattered his life. He started. I was hungry. I washed dishes. Emily looked up at him. She looked at his face, his hands. She saw the change. She didn't smile, but her eyes were bright. How did it taste? She asked. It was good, he whispered. It was the best. He slowly sat down on the marble step next to her. A billionaire in filthy boots, sitting with his maid's daughter. The silence in the hall was comfortable. It was no longer empty. The wishes are done, he said. Yes, she said. They are. He looked at this strange, small, powerful child. What you did? It was cruel, Emily. No, she said, her voice soft. It was a lesson. My great-grandpa said you can't know a man until you've walked a mile in his boots. James looked down at the cracked, ruined work boots on his feet. I walked 10 miles, I think. Maybe more. You're not the same man, Mr. Anderson. No, he said. He looked at his hands. The hands that served. The hands that fixed. The hands that scrubbed. I'm not. He knew what he had to do. His old life, the board, the company, the noise, it was over. It was a game he no longer wanted to play. I have one more wish, he said. Emily looked at him, surprised. I don't have any wishes to give. No, James said. This one is mine. He stood up, his bones aching. He offered his hand to her. Tomorrow, Mary is taking the day off. You and your mother are going to the dentist. And then you're going to a house closing. Sir? Emily asked, confused. I am dissolving the Anderson Foundation, he said, the decision as clear and sharp as the morning air. The one that puts my name on buildings. And I'm starting a new one. A smaller one. The Carter Foundation. He looked at her. For socks. And cavities. And broken video games. And for people who are hungry. And, he said, it needs a director. Someone who knows how to listen. Someone who knows what people really need. Emily stared at him, her eyes wide. It's a lot of work, James said. But I'm a good helper. I can peel the potatoes. For the very first time, Emily Carter smiled. It was as bright and steady as the charging light on a small, fixed toy. James looked around the vast, empty hall. It wasn't a home. It was a prison he had built for himself. Go get your mother, Emily, he said. We have a lot of work to do. He, James Anderson, a man who owned everything, had finally learned what it meant to have enough. He was no longer a billionaire. He was just James. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't hungry at all. 6 months later, the building no longer smelled like bleach and old potatoes. It smelled like fresh paint, new lumber, and strong coffee. The sign outside, carved in simple, clear letters, read, The Carter Foundation. Inside, the main hall of the old soup kitchen was unrecognizable. The folding tables were gone, replaced with workstations, a small community library, and a clean, bright kitchen that now served 3 hot meals a day, no questions asked. Sal, in his wheelchair, was no longer dicing potatoes. He was managing logistics, directing a shipment of new winter coats into the storage room. Brenda, her face looking 10 years younger, was running the entire food program. James Anderson walked in, carrying a large cardboard box. He wore simple khaki pants and a worn, blue flannel shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked thinner, healthier, and happier. Morning, Sal, James said, setting the box down. The new boots you ordered. Steel-toed, insulated. Should be right for the construction crew. About time, James, Sal grumbled, but he was smiling. You're late. We got people waiting. Sorry, James said, wiping a smudge of grease from his hand. The plumbing at the women's shelter on 9th Street backed up. Had to snake the main drain. A billionaire playing plumber, Sal chuckled, shaking his head. I've seen it all. Ex-billionaire, James corrected him quietly. And I'm a better plumber than I was a potato peeler, at least. He walked toward a small, simple office in the back. The door was open. Emily Carter sat at the desk, her school backpack hanging off the chair. She was finishing her homework, a stack of foundation requests waiting beside it. At 11, she had become the foundation's moral compass. How was school? James asked, leaning against the doorframe. Fine, Emily said, not looking up. Mrs. Gable's ramp was approved by the city. The crew can start tomorrow. Good. I'll be there. You don't need to be at every build, James. I like the work, he said simply. It's clean. A woman entered the office, hesitant. She was thin, but her eyes, once red-rimmed and hollow, were bright. It was the mother from the hospital. Mr. James, she said, nodding at him. She turned to Emily. Miss Carter, I'm here for my volunteer shift. Just wanted to give you this. She handed Emily a small, framed photograph. It was of her son, David. He was standing on a porch, his hair growing back in soft, fuzzy patches. He was holding up the old handheld game and smiling. He's in remission, the mother said, her voice thick with a miracle. He starts school next week. He still calls Mr. Anderson the toy fixer. He wanted you to have this. Emily took the photo and placed it on her desk, right next to a small, framed picture of her great-grandfather, Sergeant Michael Carter. Thank you, Emily said, her voice soft. He looks strong. We're strong, the mother said. She looked at James, her gaze steady. What you're doing here, it's not just walls. It's everything else. She smiled and went to put on an apron in the kitchen. James and Emily were quiet for a moment. The mansion sold, James said, looking at the photo of David. The final papers were signed this morning. Does that make you sad? Emily asked. No, James said. It was just a big, empty house. It was a place to practice smiles. He looked around the bustling, noisy, chaotic room. He looked at Sal bossing around volunteers, at the mother serving stew, at Emily, reviewing a grant for a high school robotics team. This is a home. Emily nodded. She picked up the next file. This one's a problem, she said. The city's after-school budget was cut. They're going to lose their music program. They need instruments. James looked at her. He thought of the man he used to be, the man who would have made one phone call, signed one check, and solved it in 5 minutes, feeling nothing. He smiled. All right, let's go see what they need. I'm pretty good at fixing things. He grabbed a hammer from a toolbox by the door, and together, they walked out into the bright, cold afternoon to do the work. And that's where we'll leave James and Emily, with the work just beginning. My hope is that this story gave you a chance to step out of your own world and into theirs, even for just a little while. I'm always fascinated to know what you were doing while listening. Perhaps commuting, winding down for the night, or just stealing a quiet moment with a cup of tea. I'd love to hear about it in the comments. I genuinely read them all. And if you want to make sure we find each other again, hitting like and subscribing means more than you know. Thank you for being here and for listening.